like?
I was terrified.
I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Boris Johnson's former chief advisor has told the COVID inquiry he warned of the NHS imploding like a zombie apocalypse film. Dominic Cummings says he called for daily crisis meetings, fearing the pandemic was coming much faster than expected. He also said the government had no plan to help vulnerable people during lockdown, and the Cabinet Office was trying to block the creation of a shielding plan.
The Cabinet Office was a bomb site, and many officials have come to me and said this is causing chaos. There has to be some formalised system to actually grip this, because the Cabinet Office was a dumpster fire.
Meanwhile, a group of pro-Palestinian activists staged a sit-in at Liverpool Street Station earlier this evening in protest at the Israel-Hamas conflict. More than 500 people joined the protest to demand an immediate ceasefire to Israel's attacks on Gaza and an end to arms exports to Israel. Well, Israel's military says it killed a very senior Hamas commander after an airstrike on the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. The IDF has said it killed Ibrahim Biari, who it says was a ringleader of the attack on October 7th. The airstrike also killed 50 Palestinians and left 150 injured. Officials are now saying the opening of Gaza's Rafah border crossing tomorrow will allow for 81 severely wounded Palestinians to be treated in Egypt. XL bully dogs will be banned at the end of the year. From the 31st of December, it'll be illegal to breed, sell, rehome or abandon an XL bully dog. Existing owners will be required to follow a strict set of rules, such as ensuring the dog is muzzled and on a lead. And finally, King Charles has delivered a speech at the State House in Nairobi, where he quoted from the late Queen his mother's diary. In that, Queen Elizabeth II said she didn't want to miss a moment of Kenya's extraordinary landscape. King Charles also thanked the people of Kenya for their support for the late Queen in 1952, when she became monarch. His Majesty also acknowledged the more difficult times of Britain and Kenya's shared history, finishing with a touching toast.
It is upon the enduring connection between our people that our partnership rests. It is on their enterprise, imagination and fortitude that our common hopes depend. Together we are stronger, together our future is more secure, and together, as your national anthem says, may we dwell in unity, peace and liberty.
You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and now on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's time for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's newspapers. I am Simon Evans. Tonight my comedian panel is made up of headliners Warhorse Josh Howie and young stallion Nicholas DeSanto. They've implied not merely youth but a certain degree of fecundity on your part there, I think.
I take it.
How that makes you feel.
I feel like I'm about to be turned into glue.
Yeah, you're out there in the paddock. You're being sent to live on the farm.
Dog food.
Right, let's crack on with those front pages. The Daily Mail. Now Cummings feels the heat, and they have an amusing photograph of him. I thought he did rather well, but we'll come on to that later. Telegraph, Cummings fed toxic misogynist culture in number 10, and they are enhancing that view with their selected photograph. Guardian, graveyard for children. Airstrikes kills dozens at Gaza refugee camp. The Express revealed orgy of narcissist at the heart of COVID failings. Narcissism at the heart of COVID failings. iNews have UK's old people should accept their fate from COVID. Boris Johnson's private stance revealed. And finally, the Daily Star, Britain, an apology. Well, those were your front pages. So we start with virtually the only front cover not concerned with the COVID inquiry, Josh, that's The Guardian.
Yes, graveyard for children, airstrikes kill dozens at Gaza refugee camp. That graveyard for children is a quote from UNICEF, not that they have any skin in the game. Obviously, they have to work with Hamas. They operate at Hamas's discretion within there. But the IDF have said basically they did 2 airstrikes. This is, first of all, using the word refugee camp is somewhat of a misnomer. As you can see from the photo, it's a built-up city, but it's where people resided from 1975, for over the last 75, from 1948. And essentially, it seems like what happened was what Hamas, as we know, have been famously talking about how they built all these tunnels, and the IDF basically blew up or did an airstrike that seemed to have destroyed... On a tunnel. There's on the ground evidence of buildings collapsing inwards, and it seems like they've killed about 50 terrorists. Now,
so that would look like sinkholes there.
Yeah,
in the
sinkholes,
photograph.
exactly.
Yeah, OK.
This is war. And I'm sure that there are civilians. Israel says it's done what it can to get people out, warning people to go. Also, there's been no electricity or water in this particular area for the last week or so. But you know, any civilian who
obviously
dies is a tragedy. Of course.
I mean, it perhaps goes without saying, but there are always in wars two parallel engagements. There's the physical, the war, the battle, and then there's the propaganda war. Do you feel at this stage that Israel is keeping? I mean, obviously at this point it's almost unilateral. It's very asymmetric, certainly, because Hamas kicked it off and they've just retreated now. How do you feel that's going from their point of view?
I mean, in terms of the bigger picture, I don't think Hamas thought that their attack would be so successful, and I think they're now realising that, yes, their days are numbered. It's not going to be overnight, but certainly Israel is very resolved to finish this war that they didn't start. In terms of the actual the propaganda war, which I feel like I'm part of, frankly, I'm on my phone on Twitter all day, every day, trying to fight this narrative. It's a numbers game, and you're talking about... there are 16 million Jews in the world. There are 2 billion Muslims, and it's not just Muslims, but I'm just talking about when we're dealing with this level of numbers, it's very hard to fight against that. And also, there's so many. It's a very complicated issue. So to try and actually explain this stuff, look, no one wants to see pictures of dead children or dead anybody. It's horrible.
Can I ask you, Nick? I know that a number of people have been saying that Iran is the source of the weapons, the funding and the malice possibly behind this, and they will not particularly care about dead Palestinians, dead Gazans. Do you have any sort of view on that? I mean, this seems to be part of the narrative that doesn't really seem to get into the newspapers, and yet I see a lot of discussion about it quite openly on Twitter and so on.
Of course, Iran doesn't care about Palestinian civilians, just like Hamas doesn't care, and they openly say that, because they say this is the blood that gives us motivation and feeds our revolution and all that. And ultimately, the responsibility for the civilians lies with Hamas. It's no secret that they use these residential areas and civilians as human shields. They want to maximize these numbers exactly to give this sort of narrative to Western mainstream media, who would then create this moral equivalency between Israeli actions, who try not to actually target civilians, and the Hamas actions, who openly targeted civilians on October the 7th.
And staying roughly with the same story, we look at the Sun front page, which seems to be very much part of this propaganda war. Nick?
Sorry.
How dare you?
We are transitioning into the Sun. Yeah, this is quite a, I mean, not a sad story, but not surprising, because again, we have two British police forces who have, let's face it, cowered to the woke demands, or they've taken sides, because we've seen this time and time again, not just in this case of Hamas-Israeli war, but when BLM protests happened, when environmentalists blocked streets and roads, and of course, over the past few days, when Hamas supporters have marched in London and elsewhere. So we have in Greater Manchester and in North London, police forces removing posters of Israeli hostages kept in Gaza Strip, and of course bystanders have gone furious over that, have protested. Manchester Police has apologized, too little too late for the concerned citizens, but the Metropolitan Police has said no. Basically, this was our reaction because we received reports that these posters were put in place there in retaliation for the shopkeeper who was accused of having posted pro-Hamas material on social media. I suppose
to try and steelman their position, to try and understand them in the best possible light, it would depend to some extent on exactly where these posters were going up. If they were going up in a predominantly Muslim neighbourhood, they would be perceived as an accusation rather than as a lament. Does that make any difference in your view?
I think that probably does make a difference. I think that's fair if it is like used in that way. I actually hadn't read that, but I've never seen the police pull down any other posters for any other thing.
I mean, posting is like on every urban environment, isn't it? It covers the place.
I mean, these are pictures of kidnapped children. And then when you see the video footage of the venom that people tear them off, oh, they don't exist. It's all this is just all lies.
Scribbling on their faces.
Scribbling. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Let's have a look at the Telegraph, where we get into a rather more domestic dispute.
Yes, Cummings fed toxic misogynist culture at number 10. This is the COVID inquiry. His expletive-laden WhatsApp surf revealed for all of the world to see, referring to everybody as morons and
worse.
Pigs and various others. Yes. He's got. I like his language myself. It's a sign of intelligence, that level of swearing.
I absolutely agree. Well, I think we've done that story. It comes around every so often. Swearing is a sign of intelligence, but it's also a sign of being somebody who hasn't got time to waste. I mean, Malcolm from the thick of it was understood to be the greatest character because he spoke his mind in paint blistering style. Yeah. And I would honestly say, I don't care about expletives. One expletive is not worth a single lost life or a single lost minute in the pursuit of a coherent COVID strategy.
Or a single lost
we should be discussing.
Yeah, well, that is. Well, I mean, yes. So, but I mean, to be fair, it isn't really about swearing. No. It's obviously it's about the fact, exactly as you're saying, is this toxic culture that permeated and led to some bad decisions. And I mean, it's not looking good for our future presenter buddy. I mean, in terms of some of the things that have come out that he'd said.
Well, I mean, it's a slightly separate issue, Nick. I don't know what you think about this. Most of the things that Johnson has said, I think, were certainly justified to be raising. For instance, you know, we look at the average age of those being killed by COVID. It was higher than the life expectancy within the United Kingdom. I think it's perfectly reasonable at that point to say, do we completely, you know, torch the economy for 6 months in order to keep reasonable questions? What seems to be coming from Cummings is not so much the direction, so much as the dither and the failure for him to concentrate. Really, would that be fair?
The ineptitude of it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Boris, it was an unprecedented situation all over the world, and no one. We keep saying Sweden, but Sweden was the exception that proved the rule. Yeah. So who would have done better in place instead of Boris? That is also something to be taken into account.
I think Sweden, absolutely. I just want to say the big difference in Sweden is that they had this stuff set up and they stuck to it because the person who had the authority to make these decisions wasn't beholden to the politicians who were beholden to the narrative.
Absolutely. It's an extraordinarily functional and solvent and well-organised society generally, isn't it? And everyone's got their own, you know, nice detached villa and they all walk around dressed in grey cashmere all the time. It's just not a comparable society at all. I don't blame us for panicking somewhat. That's the front pages. In part 2, we have King Charles on tour, Black Cabs Matter, and the greatest threat since ISIS. I wonder who that could be. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I'm joined tonight. That's surely been done by Josh Howie and Nicholas De Santo, the stallion, etc. This Times, Josh, we have some encouragingly eloquent dialogue between the King and Kenya.
Yeah, King Charles arrives in Kenya for his first Commonwealth visit as monarch that threatens to be overshadowed by controversy over colonial era abuses. But where that is actually coming from it's not like...
Well, we've seen the speeches in the news there. It looked like he confronted it. It looked like he got it out in the open. And the president, whose name escapes me, of Kenya.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. He seemed pretty happy with this as an initial salvo. Obviously, he would like to see some reparations.
I mean, look, there are people, who are calling for reparations and this unconditional, unequivocal public apology and whatnot. But that's coming from the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. There's no doubt that England is... Britain did some bad stuff back in the day when it came to the independence.
Exactly. It wasn't even that long ago, was it? This is possibly our most recent imperial atrocity.
5,000 Kenyans or like 10,000 people from this Kikuyu tribe were killed during this crackdown. So, not good stuff. And this 2013, the British government, UK government, agreed to pay about $3,000 to everybody.
But it's been a fairly affable meeting from what I could see, and they both spoke quite eloquently, Nicholas.
Yeah, the King's language was quite measured. Yes. He did acknowledge the dark, chapter, short of an apology, which I think would have been unnecessary.
Sorry seems to be the hardest word.
Yeah.
But that does always carry with it sort of certain financial implications, doesn't it?
Exactly. And where would you start with all the former colonies and territories? And which other colonial power had not to my knowledge,
History is a nightmare from which we are all trying to awaken.
And transitions can be messy. Just look at the U.S. retreat from Afghanistan, and that was planned, and they were allies.
Yes, I was quite impressed with the president's response as well, though. He actually seemed like he was well, I don't know what to say, the bigger man, but he certainly wasn't going to try and kind of snap at him.
Because after all, you don't want to embarrass your guest of honor.
No. Charles easing into it then in his 75th year. Good for him. Nicholas, the Independent now, and after Captain Tom, it turns out that Black Lives Matter was a racket too. I expect it'll be the paper clack for the NHS next or something.
Black Lives Matter march organizer who splurged thousands in donations on taxis and takeaways is jailed 2.5 years to be precise. This is Zara Salim. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She organized one of those notorious, infamous Black Lives Matter marches in Bristol, the one which led into that episode in which they threw Edward Colston's statue, huge figure in Bristol, of course.
Although that was famously, the people who did that were 4 insufferable middle-class twerps, weren't they, with names like Porridge or something? I can't remember.
It's always like that.
Probably a Just Stop Oil march right now.
Whereas this lady is part of the larger Black Lives Matter.
Exactly, who was one of the main co-organizers of actually that march, which led to that episode, which obviously raised a lot of questions over this episode. I mean, the people of Bristol were not consulted. It was just the mob who decided to bring down this statue, and obviously raised serious questions over who should decide for public figures and what to do with our past and our legacy and all that. And of course, that episode attracted a lot of attention to her, that is Zara Salim's GoFundMe page, which otherwise wouldn't have received the £32,000 that it did receive.
Exactly, the first terrorist in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, £32,000.
Exactly.
So you bank that and you don't lose that.
I don't know if she would have got that far.
No.
She spent it all on cabs, Ubers,
I'm
and
amazed that
food.
people still give to these things. You know, the odds of it becoming a scam just seem to be insuperable.
Well, she was meant to pass the money onto this charity called Changing Your Mindset. I've got to be honest, though, when you look, and then that was going to fund a trip for people to Ghana, but also some of the stuff that they were talking about there, it doesn't seem like it would have been group sessions, cookery classes, career advice, life coaching. It sounds like there could be a little bit of like, oh yeah, I'm going to do, because there was that charity, do you remember that Camilla, the woman who...
Batman.
Not that one. No, that charity was a very good charity.
Okay.
No, kids company. No, that was... No, Camilla at the... not Camilla's... Remember at the palace, and there was a woman...
Oh, yes, yes.
And all that stuff. And it turns out, like, they'd charged 50,000 for
the one who was insulted by the questions asked about the lady.
So it's, you know, where exactly how this money would have otherwise have been spent is
might not have been any better than black cabs and dinners anyway.
Definitely.
Josh, the FBI do not regard Hamas as merely a local threat, it seems.
Yeah, Hamas poses greatest threat, terrorist threat since ISIS, FBI chief warns. I don't think they're literally talking about ISIS, even though Hamas has arguably these connections to the UK even, but this is talking America, through Iran and proxies, and even saying that, you know, there was a Times piece in the weekend about how these, a lot of these, the big marches are being sort of partly sort of financed or created by Hamas. Anyway, but it's inspiring people. Yeah. And that is an absolute danger because, you know, when you... Seeing that footage from, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where there's people calling, you know, for jihad and with the Muslim army posters and the police just standing there, it's going to embolden people because they're going to see that and go, well, we just got away with that. We can wave our little ISIS or big ISIS.
Well, we've had it again today, Liverpool Street Station, one of the biggest stations in the city of London.
So all it takes is one nutter of the 100,000 people out there who even then can't seem to read an actual history book to actually do something and go and think, I've got history on my side, because we're all in this little bubble thinking that we're morally right.
What do you think, Nicholas? Do the police have an option at this point to close these marches down? They seem to be of an extraordinary size.
Well, I mean, at the risk of being or saying something cliche, prevention is better than cure. We bring in millions of people from incompatible, if not hostile cultures, and then we are surprised that millions of them demonstrate in the streets. To be fair to the police, not that, I mean, they are totally justified, but sometimes they have to weigh different options and you know, opt for the lesser evil because they think, as we just saw in the episode of removing hostages pictures, they are afraid that they might trigger actually bigger violence, civil war, terrorist attacks.
And they have to make a judgment call as to whether to ban a march might inflame passions more than to allow steam to exit.
They just seem to be massively outnumbered, and that seems to be the problem, is that they just want to get to the end of the day intact. I understand that, but it's not doing good for our country. You know?
The Guardian now, Nicholas. The Guardian has outsourced reputational damage to artificial intelligence, you see.
Microsoft accused of damaging Guardian's reputation with AI-generated code. This is a fascinating story because AI, and of course its implications, is all the rage nowadays. Basically, this was the story of, the sad story of Lily James, who was a 20-year-old water polo coach who was found dead. And there was an article by The Guardian written about this story, a serious article, obviously. And then companies like Microsoft, they have these services called news aggregators, or aggregation of the news, where you maybe turn on your laptop and you see a compilation of news, or elsewhere on your mobile phones. And they have a license to actually use journalistic content by the likes of Guardian.
And also The Guardian as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and good one. The problem emerged when the Microsoft places an AI-generated poll, and a silly one, unfortunately, next to the article by The Guardian, which said, oh, do you think this lady was killed or committed suicide? And a lot of viewers couldn't distinguish between Guardian's article, which was serious, and this stupid poll.
So this is, the AI has been able to detect the informational content of the article, but not detect the emotional, the sentimental aspect of it, that dimension, which makes that a completely inappropriate question to ask. Is that what it is? Is that roughly right?
But I mean, the funny thing is the Guardian saying it's damaged the Guardian's reputation. It's like, you're doing a lot of that yourself. Mate.
Well, we'll see what they do next time. So the Telegraph now, Josh, and this remains in the territory of rather unsettling and disturbing news. A sport very few Brits are well placed to judge for foul play.
Yeah, Matt Petgrave absolutely intended clash with Adam Johnson in ice hockey death, ex-NHL star. The reason we're doing the story is because one of the producers is a big fan of ice hockey, but it is. I mean, obviously, it's tragic, and
it was horrific.
Yeah,
I watched it.
Oh, you watched it?
I have watched it, and I mean, it's interesting that headline that he says, you know, he absolutely intended the clash. That I don't think anyone can deny. The question is whether he intended to do serious damage.
Yes.
He lifts his skate to the height of this guy's throat and basically kills him with what amounted like a kind of ice skate kung fu
kick. If it's like Beckham, sort of. Remember when he lashed out with his boot and whatever?
Well, he was lying face down.
No, I'm just saying.
It's more like Cantona when he dived in. I mean, I'm not saying it was a deliberate. I'm not claiming it was.
I'm just saying you wouldn't. Obviously, this person did say he didn't intend to kill him. But he might intend for something to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. And under the law, I think he needs to have intended GBH, which I have a suspicion he may be confronting that case, but we'll see. But do you have a view on it, Nick?
Well, he has been accused by this TV host on Fox News of homicide, and then Sean Avery, who was like the Eric Cantona of NHL, actually. He was in 2 seasons in NHL in the US, he was the record holder for the biggest number of punishment minutes suffered. So he's no, saint, but he said, no, this is not homicide. Obviously, it's a very unnatural move.
Well, he says don't throw words like homicide around, but he definitely intended that to be a collision of some sort.
Well, who knows? Maybe he got, annoyed and he wanted to do something, spur of the moment thing.
The thing about ice hockey is it's famously bruising. The old joke goes something like, I went to see a fight and an ice hockey match broke out. It's that people expect rough and tumble, but it's usually people stay on their feet and keep their... I've never seen that. Somebody raise a skate that high before. It was completely...
And now there might be 2 positive outcomes, because now they are investigating whether it's actually worthwhile to change the material, I think it's titanium, from the blades, and also wear neck protection.
Yeah, or maybe make a rule against slicing people's necks with,
Yeah, I mean, is this the first time this has ever happened?
Absolutely.
So...
That's the first half in the can. In part 3, we have the last few Little Britain sketches to get banned, diversity training doesn't work, and autopilot wasn't to blame. That could all be one story, but it's actually 3. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new t-shirt.
It's your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
News Radio.
And welcome back to Headliner. So the Daily Mail have Ofcom's ruling on just one of the Linda Flint sketches in Little Britain, presumably meaning that they intend to take the others down one by one.
Well, I mean, yeah, which one would be okay in this
Have you watched them all? They're hilarious.
Yeah, I love them when they were aired. Controversial Little Britain sketch where David Walliams says Asian character smells of soy sauce is racist and outdated. And it is surprising the sketch is still available on iPlayer according to Ofcom research. So first of all, I don't know these survey participants, a bunch of snowflakes and wet blankets. Maybe they found them from one of my comedy crowds.
It could only be 1 or 2 people. It's 115 people that they interviewed.
All of them from Goldsmith University, probably.
2 people like that.
Yeah. Because you go to these people, especially if these are the millennials, and you say, okay, we are looking for offensive material, and they find everything offensive. Now,
so if anyone hasn't seen it, a recurring character called Linda Flint who describes whoever's sitting in front of her to somebody you don't see on the phone. And basically, if the description becomes more and more
she works at a
offensive.
university and she's a lefty and she's racist, or she's being racist, but trying not to be racist.
She's got to go, how can I describe him? He's a little bit overweight, or he's bald, or whatever.
It's a commentary on racism rather than trying to be racist.
They've got it totally wrong, because, and it's a series of sketches. So each time we have a person, in this case, a Chinese person, where you have people who are maybe overweight or ugly or whatever, and she starts very nicely, and when she gets, she's on the phone, and all of a sudden, she totally changed. And that's the funny thing. The funny thing is not that the person has been described as a Chinaman, you know, which, if you quote American comedian John Mulaney, is one of the most unimaginative racial slurs, a Chinaman. The fact is that actually Linda Flint is being mocked by the producers or by the writers, and not the other way around.
A kind of middle England, well-intentioned but clod-hopping middle-aged woman who thinks she's with the programme but is in fact not.
And these programmes have warning as well already, so if you have an issue, turn it off.
It is extraordinary how we just seem to be going back over all the comedy of the last... And it's catching up, isn't it? It's getting closer and closer and closer. Do you know what I mean? It's like Achilles and the tortoise. We're soon going to be going... Last week's episode has been now revisited and...
Well, that's why I don't make any of these clips funny anymore.
They'll come for you, don't you worry. Telegraph now, Josh, diversity training is at best diluted, at worst a scam. This is according to its originator. So is that just another scam he's come up with?
Someone's actually said, no, diversity training does not work, admits diversity trainer. And basically, you've finally got somebody from that side who basically just essentially points to the evidence that shows that everybody is prejudiced. Everybody being white people, black people, Asian people, any ethnicity, everybody has it. It's ingrained within our psychology of the other. And so his argument is that all this training, it cannot be eradicated. What we can do, though, is recognise these prejudices, work within them, and then try and make things fair, make the system fair. That's not to say that racism doesn't exist, but the point is the stuff that they're doing right now and they're spending millions on is a con. It doesn't work.
So from what I remember, I don't know whether you've done one of these tests, they used to do them at the BBC where you were kind of encouraged to do a kind of computer game which would demonstrate to you that you had problems. For instance, you would struggle to associate good qualities with a black person or something like this, you know. And this was supposed to be like a kind of like wake-up call. It wasn't supposed to change your behaviour, just alert you to it. But it sounds like he's saying that it's just not going to work. None of it helps.
And it's essentially based on the premise that only white people have bias, because apparently creators of these courses have never heard what Asian people or Arabs, Iranians, Turks, Armenians say about each other.
It's extraordinary. In fact, there's a lot of research, especially from America, where they've obviously had a more multi-ethnic society for longer, to suggest that white people are the least sort of ethnically biased towards their own, you know, in-group. Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know, maybe it's suicidal.
And they allow everybody into their countries and give them passports after 5 years. Only white people.
Yeah, absolutely. We deserve a medal, really. Anyway, alarming news from Italy in the Telegraph, Nicholas. Perhaps the single most enduring stereotype about Mediterranean families is exposed as woefully outdated.
Yeah, this is a sad story and an alarm bell. Europe is in the grips of a birth rate crisis, and Britain is heading the same way. Obviously, Italy has been described unenviably as the demographic laboratory where the lowest birth rates are being witnessed. The country is shrinking, and so many other European countries. Britain also has had the lowest birth rate, if I'm not wrong, in about a decade. The birth rate is at a record low. And again, one of the major implications, especially discussed in this article, is the question of paying into the pension system, the economic growth and all that.
People are living longer as well as not being replaced by babies as well. It's a double whammy.
But the number... sorry.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the scale of it, when they look at Sardinia in particular here, you've got a population that is going to be halving by 2050. I mean, that 2050 isn't really that long away. To have half its population gone, and it's basically there's 40% fewer 18 to 34-year-olds than 20 years ago. You just got empty towns there.
And of course, what will happen is when they go below a certain point, everyone who does live there will just leave because there won't be enough to sustain them. The young people, there won't be enough bars.
So it's an exponential problem.
Yeah, that's already happening right now in Sardinia.
But again, linking this to my favorite topic, which we sort of touched upon, one solution or quick solution is millions of immigrants, and then we have all the social clashes and diversity and multiculturalism.
It's a short-term fix, but of course it doesn't work, and it doesn't encourage people to have babies. And I think one of the major reasons why Europeans, certainly in Britain, are not having babies is because they cannot afford houses, and one of the reasons they can't afford houses is because there is an immigration crisis, and so these things all spiral in the wrong direction. It is not just a European problem, though. Of course, Singapore, South Korea, some of the major economies of the world, absolutely. In fact, there are very few. I don't think there's anywhere actually left which is really, you know, powering ahead.
But it lays it out here. It's affordable housing and affordable childcare. Those are the two things. Sort it out. And you have countries now like Hungary and whatever. Basically, if you have 4 kids or more, you don't have to pay taxes for the rest of your life. I'm moving there.
You should go there. It does seem to me as well, this is worth mentioning, I think, that a lot of the more conservative systems, including Islam, will look, I think, at the crisis that feminism and so on and the equal pay and the gender parity kind of idea brings about. They will associate those two things and they will resist it even further, and so there will be more of a schism.
And you can't blame them somehow.
Josh, landmark case in America after a Tesla runs into a landmark. This is in The Guardian.
Yeah, Tesla prevails in US lawsuit alleging autopilot was at fault in a fatal crash. This is 2019. The driver died, 2 people survived, and they basically lost their case because the jury found 93 in it was human error that caused it. I think that the point is that when this idea of autopilot isn't really autopilot, it's sort of helps, but you still need a human being to use it. The driver was drunk, but this obviously does have long-term implications because we're having all of these different programs to try and integrate all of this autopilot.
Yeah.
That's the future, supposedly.
I guess the big question then is, it says the car veered off the highway east of Los Angeles at 65 miles per hour and struck a palm tree and burst into flames, all in the span of seconds. The question is whether the driver was in control of it or whether Tesla, whether the autopilot, and that doesn't seem to have been established.
Well, they've established it.
They have, to their satisfaction. Because you're always going to be able to overmaster the autopilot, aren't you? You can't expect the autopilot to go, I'm sorry, but we're not leaving the traffic here at this point. What is your sense? Mine is, to be honest, that these cars are going to be safer than human drivers if they're not already.
Yeah, I mean, we have autopilot, as the name suggests, on airplanes.
Yeah.
And this is a pivotal moment because these cars are crucial not to the future of Tesla as a company, huge company, but also the way we drive in the future. And now, as Josh was saying, Tesla has successfully argued, and for the second time, there was another one again in California, if I'm not wrong, which they won. Despite its name, you should have some level of monitoring over it.
Absolutely. But this is, I mean, as you say, it's not just a question of putting your feet up or allowing it to take over. If this is the future, this has an impact, for instance, on the decision to cancel HS2, I think, because if you start to look at self-driving or, electric vehicles that will just take you up and down the motorway and then go off and park themselves when they get to your destination and then come back to you when you call them on the... Do you know what I mean? This kind of thing is that's...
Two models for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's going to be there, and I cannot see... humans just don't have a good enough record to complain. Macronicity now in the Metro, Josh. Great French president has been denouncing the English language, despite all the nice things we said about France last... Oh, you got this one.
I think it's me.
Sorry. Go ahead.
This is an interesting story. France sues the EU over adoption of English as a standard language. Now, we know that the French and the English, the rivalry between these two major popular languages, the French have had this grievance against the domination of English in the European Union institutions. Although all of them have equal status, all the 24 of them have equal status and are official. And Macron has sort of departed from the tradition of French statesmen. He speaks a lot of English, on maybe showing off his English in public occasions overseas.
Or just wanting, because there aren't always words in French, are there? What do you need to say?
Yes,
not everything is bread.
as a US comedian said, the French, for example, their language is so poor they don't have a word for entrepreneur.
George W. Bush. But I will say that the word entrepreneur does not mean entrepreneur in French. It doesn't have the same meaning. It is obviously a French word, but it's used to mean somebody who starts up businesses. Not what it means there.
What does it mean in France?
I think it might mean undertaker.
Oh, OK.
Which is what it literally means, to undertake, to do, to fulfil a contract.
Okay.
I might be getting that wrong, but anyway,
But it is funny because England's now obviously out of the EU, that's actually emboldened English as a use because now it's seen as neutral. Because it's like you're not saying, French people, we win.
It's basically Esperanto, isn't it?
And a lot of these Eastern European countries, I've watched European Parliament sessions, they actually prefer to speak English, whether because they like America, because of their history, or it's simple.
They don't want to learn French.
They do, they feel it in their bones. That is part 3, Tanked and Bagged. We have one more section to go, vanishing accents, FIFA's fiasco, contraceptive apps. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. So, English accents now, Josh. 2 have gone extinct, namely my 2.
Yeah, well, English accents have changed so much that 2 big ones are brown bread. Oh, so what brown bread is?
Dead.
Dead. OK, there we go. Cockney
rhyming slang and the received pronunciation.
The King's English now, I guess.
That's right.
And
those are the 2 that I do well.
Those are, yeah, exactly. Now they've been replaced by 3 others. This is really a survey of people down south, but those are essentially you've got basically got the Essex accent, which is
what?
or house is has.
Jamie Oliver.
Has, yeah, a bit like.
And then stop.
You've got sort of King's English, which is goose is like geese. I don't know, whatever they say. Josh Whittaker.
Sounds like Stephen Gerrard.
Yeah, and then you've got sort of London multicultural. That's what I kind of do when I'm in the cab. All right, mate, how you doing? All right, geese.
That's Stormzy,
sort of,
isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what
Stormzy,
they say. Yeah.
You know, that's what languages do. They change, they adapt.
They do. They sink to the bottom, they become incoherent, they debase, they degrade, they collapse, they dissolve.
Accents play a massive role, and certainly within the UK, where it's arguably, historically, it's about distinguishing class.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now is that you have people who it's not going to be so easy to judge how much money they come from, all that stuff.
It was very. I mean, I remember watching the estimable BBC drama of reenactment of the Savile years recently, and the big deal they made about Savile overcoming his Yorkshire accent, which was considered to be a significant bar to him appearing on BBC television, and maybe should have been allowed to be a bar at that.
We would have known he was a paedophile.
I remember one of your jokes is that at some point, if you had one of those northern accents, you were entitled to disability benefits.
Yes, that's right. Very good. That was buried deep in that whole routine. If you're struggling to place my accent, it is, in fact, educated. Yes. No, I mean, I think regional accents may be still OK. You're talking about what's replacing Cockney and so on in London. But RP, the Queen's English, or whatever you would call it, the sort of BBC, the crystal, here is the news, that's just gone, hasn't it? Nobody speaks like that.
And I don't think she even spoke like that, did she?
No, probably not. There was a certain... Kate Adie still has it, possibly, when she hosts from our own correspondent. That's about the closest you'll hear now, I think.
You can just listen and remember the good old days.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she pronounces TH with F thank you, and it just sends
Some
chills
kids
down my spine.
cannot hear the difference, I think. Genuinely, it's an auditory processing
She
thing.
thinks I'm joking when I say, no, it's not thank you.
Yeah, but you've learned it from scratch, hard work,
Yeah.
whereas she's just absorbed it through osmosis. The Times next, Nicholas. If FIFA had a shred of credibility left after Qatar, it has surely gone down the plug hole now.
That's right. Another story about sports washing, it's called, right? Saudi Arabia will host 2034 World Cup as Australia ends bid. So basically, just a couple of days after FIFA basically did some moral posturing, if you like, and sentenced Rubiales, Spanish Football Federation chief, to 3 years ban, to a 3-year ban from football because of that controversial kiss. You know, they are going to give almost inevitably the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia because they have this rotational basis now. Each time it goes to members of one of the members of a specific continent.
Yes.
This time Asia and Oceania were up, and Saudi Arabia is the only country bidding.
Yes.
And
Australia briefly bid and then withdrew its bid and has gone for something called the World Cup of Clubs or something.
Yeah, in 2029.
So, I mean, essentially your point is they've kicked this Spanish president out for stealing a kiss, and instead they have rewarded a country where systemic sexism is so entrenched.
Shortly after the very controversial World Cup in Qatar. You know, same issues again here.
I will say the one thing about Qatar, I know this isn't the issue, but one part of it that was the issue when they first awarded it, when it was most discussed, I think, when I remember, which was, I think, around 2001 or something, we first heard about it, was that it was just going to be too hot and they don't have any stadiums or traditional football. And on that front, I would say they rose to the challenge. Obviously, we know that there were questions over the workers' safety and so on when they built the stadiums. But actually having the tournament roughly in December, you know, it disrupted our football season a little bit, but actually that
People
kind of
weren't
worked.
passing out or anything like that.
No, that kind of worked. So I think I'm just mentioning that. But obviously, you know, there's also the human rights.
Also, there's going to be even less alcohol, like no alcohol, you know. And but the interesting thing is, obviously, the new prince or whatever, you know, or the new leader, wants to change.
This is MBS, right?
Yeah, he wants to change Saudi Arabia. 2034. 10 years away-ish. I mean, how big a shift will have happened during that time?
Well, it's enough time for Sardinia to die, so, you know, maybe it's enough time for Saudi Arabia to rise to the challenge.
But to be fair to Saudi Arabia, Qatar had never even participated in a World Cup, so that was scandalous. Whereas Saudi Arabia has traditionally been a footballing powerhouse of that region. And
Saudi Arabia, if I remember rightly, beat the eventual winners of the last World Cup in the opening game, beat Argentina. Did they not? Creating shockwaves. I'm pretty sure Saudi Arabia beat Argentina.
They did. You're right.
Before they got their act together. Josh, contraception news now. Too late for you, of course, but the Mail have a promising trend for women.
Yes. Why did I not know this information before? Death of the pill. Number of women relying on natural family planning apps to avoid pregnancy doubles in a decade amid celeb and social media-inspired trend to ditch hormonal contraception. So obviously, the pill has changed society, or Western society certainly, since the 60s. And this, but it comes with a price in terms of for women the hormonal imbalance,
civilization, but also
collapsing civilization as well as putting on a bit of weight. I don't know which one's worse. But
it is quite serious as well, isn't it? Some women genuinely, you know, experience quite significant disruption.
Yeah, absolutely, to an already volatile state. So, but this is the idea is that doing it naturally by taking your temperature every morning, and actually it's got a 99%. If you do it right...
This is what the Catholics used to call the rhythm method, isn't it? I think just observing the natural rhythms.
Well, I don't know if they did a lot of... They would check out their cervical mucus.
Yeah, this is more like a Bluetooth meat thermometer kind of approach, isn't it? It's a bit more... But it's essentially the same thing. Everyone knows if your periods are regular, there's a period of about 4 or 5 days when you're extremely fertile. If you can just bear to, you know, innovate during that time, you'll be all right.
Well, I thank you for telling me.
This area is not really my strong suit, so
OK,
I'll
why
pass.
don't you try this one? Well, I think this has gone to Josh. I'm not sure. Facial expressions on cats, possibly including whether they're ovulating.
Yeah, cats have 300 facial expressions, and here's how to decode them. And then it doesn't actually decode them at all.
No.
Essentially.
That would be quite an appendix to put in the Times, though, wouldn't it?
But the really interesting part about this article, which I had no idea, dogs have 27 facial movements.
Right.
But dogs evolved the ability to use their eyebrows
Yes.
i.e. the puppy dog expression.
Yeah.
And they've learnt, because wolves don't have those
No.
muscles in their face.
They get rewarded for it. It's
and they
very
get
much
rewarded,
like
and
everything
that's
else.
what it is.
It's
The
actual
puppy
behaviorism.
dog.
Yeah. You see dogs like on the internet, Labradors that have been trained to guess which cup has a treat underneath it, and then they express with their eyebrows disappointment when the other cup actually. I mean, it's so cute. But yeah, cats. I don't know how many different moods can they possibly have.
No, they're very, very complex.
Nick, you look like a cat man to me, possibly.
I do love cats. I don't own any, but yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever picked up on the expression of a cat and thought, I know what it's thinking, or what it
No,
wants?
but generally cats feel comfortable around me, and there's a mutual
You're a nice gentleman who
understanding.
pronounces his F's and his TH's
Exactly.
significantly distinct. What do you got at home apart from children?
I don't need anything else.
No?
They constantly hassle me.
Not so much as a gerbil.
No way, Jose. It's like there's that never-ending
We have
argument.
a cat and a dog, and honestly, I'm going to start bringing in some facial expressions for you to decode. So, the show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail. Now Cummings feels the heat. The Telegraph, Cummings fed toxic misogynist culture in number 10. The Guardian has a graveyard for children. Airstrikes killed dozens at Gaza refugee camp. The Express revealed orgy of narcissism at heart of COVID failings. The iNews, UK's old people should accept their fate from Boris. Johnson's private stance revealed. And finally, the Daily Star, Britain, an apology also. Boris Johnson. Those were your front pages, and that is all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Nicholas DeSanto. Leo Kirst will be here tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Josh Howie and Francis Foster. On the guest side, if you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you for your company. Sleep well. Good night.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on